next to me is the altar of incense. Here they did not sacrifice animals like they did outside, but here every day the priests had to offer incense. They would take different plants and herbs and flowers, they would grind it to a very fine powder, they would sprinkle it on the altar, and it would fill the whole room with a beautiful smell, with a beautiful aroma. That smell represents prayer, represents the prayers of the Israelites ascending to heaven, and represents our prayers today. In Psalm 141, David asks God to accept his prayers like a sweet perfume. Also, Revelation chapter 7 says the prayers of the saints is like a sweet aroma unto the Lord. So when we pray, it's like the Lord perceives it as a beautiful fragrance. Let's talk about the priest.
Yep.
A regular priest was dressed only in white, but the high priest was dressed far more beautifully. His uniform was so important that there's an entire chapter in the Bible that talks just about the clothes of the high priest. That's Exodus 28. If you read that chapter, you can read all about the different layers and pieces and colors that he had to wear. On his breastplate were written the 12 tribes of Israel. Each tribe had its own precious stone to represent it. On his shoulders were written the 12 sons of Jacob. They were written according to age that they were born, from oldest to youngest, from Reuben to Benjamin. Across his forehead, he had a crown of gold on which was written, "Holiness to the Lord." Now, when we read in English, the Lord, usually in all caps, it's not actually translating from the Hebrew word Lord Adonai, but rather it's referring to the very personal name of God, spelled with the Hebrew letters Yud He Vav He, pronounced Yehovah. The name of God, Yehovah, is short for Haya Hoveh V'Yeh, which means who was and is and will be. The Hebrew word to be or to exist is Heyet. But God's name, Yehovah, incorporates past, present, and future into his name. So every time you read the Lord, just remember his name quite literally means his eternal existence. So on the bottom, he had these bells that rang when he walked around. Do you mind ringing the bells for me? Loud and clear for everyone. Can you hear it? There you go. Thank you. That was for the Israelites to hear and know that the high priest was nearby. He had a very, very, very important role. He was the mediator between God and Israel. He was the representative, the ambassador. Aaron, the brother of Moses, chosen by God to make a sacrifice every year on Yom Kippur so that the sins of the Israelites could be forgiven. Think about that. That is really important. One man appointed by God to make a sacrifice so that the sins of everyone around him could be forgiven. Sound familiar? Exactly, it represents Jesus. The book of Hebrews compares between Jesus and the high priest multiple times. Just as the high priest was the only one who could make the sacrifice for Israel, Jesus is the only one who can make the sacrifice for us. The reason that it's like that is because there is nothing that we can do in our own power to receive forgiveness of sin. We cannot pay for our own sins. That's why we need a mediator, someone above us who can pay that price, because we can't. That is what the high priest represents. He is a shadow and a prophecy of Jesus. He is the source of light, and it's his light that shines and lights everything up. But what does he say about us? He says, you are the light of the world, right? Yes, he is the source of light, but he extends that light out onto us. Remember when we said in the beginning that we are the tabernacle of God? So if we are the tabernacle and Jesus is the light, then just as the walls of the tabernacle reflected the light of the menorah, we also need to reflect the light of Jesus. Who was inside the ark?
Aaron's staff.
Aaron's staff.
Manna.
The tablets of the law with the 10 commandments. And manna. Very good. 3 for 3. These 3 things each represent a different aspect of our relationship with God. 3 things that we need in order to be in a relationship with God. Let's go over them one by one. Staff of Aaron. Aaron was the high priest, right? The mediator. We spoke about his role as mediator. So one, we need a mediator. Who's our mediator today? Jesus. Right. What happened to the staff? No?
Budded.
It budded. Who said that? Very good. You get 10 points. Yeah, it budded. It blossomed with flowers. It was through the staff that blossomed with flowers that God showed the Israelites that he indeed had chosen Aaron to be high priest, and that it wasn't just nepotism just because he's Moses' brother. So think of this. The stick was dead, and it came back to life. It represents Jesus' resurrection from death. So again, Jesus is our mediator, our high priest. Next is the 2 tablets with the 10 commandments. That is the covenant between us and God, that anyone who keeps these 10 commandments 100% will have a perfect relationship with God. And the next is the manna. The manna represents God's provision in our lives, just as he provided for the Israelites when they were in the desert. God provides for us every single day. So 3 things. Without them, we cannot be in a relationship with God. We need a mediator, we need a covenant, and we need God's provision. But here's the problem. All 3 of these things, we as sinners, we have rejected and broken. We have rejected Jesus as our Messiah in the same way that the Israelites rejected Aaron as high priest. That's the staff. The 10 commandments. We have broken the 10 commandments. Each and every single one of us, myself included, has broken all 10 of the 10 commandments. There's not one commandment that any one of you has not broken. Now, I'm sure you probably didn't physically murder anyone, but Jesus says if you hate your brother in your heart, that's just as bad as actually murdering. If you look at a woman with lust, you have already committed adultery in your heart. And of course, we've all lied, we've all stolen, we've all coveted, we've all dishonored our parents, and worst of all, we have all dishonored God directly. So we are all guilty of breaking our covenant with God. And lastly, the manna. The Israelites complained about the manna. They said, we don't want this. We want meat. We want to go back to Egypt. Even today, we complain and complain instead of being thankful for everything God does for us. So again, we are the ones that have rejected our mediator. We are the ones that have broken God's commandments, and we are the ones that complain despite God's provision. But here's the good news. The high priest came in on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, with the blood of the sacrifice into the Holy of Holies, and sprinkled that blood on the Ark of Covenant, symbolizing God looking through the blood onto what connects us to him, showing that only through blood we can be in a relationship with God. It's as if God looks down in the Ark and doesn't see these 3 things that we have rejected and broken. He sees the blood that covers it.